Well. So, hi, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on salary negotiation. I'm joined by my friend and ex-colleague Sadaf, who's joining, I believe, from UK. Hi, Sadaf.
Hi, Sajjad. Hello, everybody else.
Thanks for taking time and spending some time with us today to talk about this topic on salary negotiation. Getting into negotiation without any shame or fear. I'll do a quick intro, but before that, let me pass it to Sadaf to just share a little bit about herself, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. So, super excited, but at the same time, I think it's a session that I was really looking forward to. Um, so I appreciate that, Sajjad, you kind of quickly caught on the idea. And we did this really quickly. So I hope it's going to be very useful for everyone.
Sure.
So just a bit about myself. So as ex-Unilever, and I know Sajjad from Unilever Pakistan, but now I'm here in UK. So I left Unilever in 22, and then I've started my own little thing. I'm an executive coach, and I've started my company by the name of Quiet Thrivers. Essentially, I focus on helping introverted leaders. So this topic is actually quite relevant for them also because you have one set of people who really dislike negotiation and especially on salary, and then you have introverts. It's a totally different spectrum, a set of problems that come for them. So that way, I think this topic becomes quite relevant. So yeah, looking forward to it to kick it off.
Thanks, Sadaf. So, hi everyone, Sajjad Parmar. Just a quick intro. Again, spent a lot of time in Unilever, then GSK, and a tech company called eBay. Most of my time has been in total rewards compensation. Therefore, we're going to spend some time talking about compensation. I have my own experience over 20 years now, dealing with a lot of offers and interviews and making offers and negotiations and all that. So, hoping to spend some time sharing some insights and also some observations that I have, and certainly Sadaf has in her now conversation in the new job. So, what I'm going to do is. This is an open session, so we don't have any rules or anything. Sadaf and I are going to have a conversation. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. Or if you're joining us from LinkedIn, just put it in the chat, and hopefully towards the end, then we can ask us those questions. Sadaf certainly has a number of questions that she comes across in her chats with her clients. I'm a big introvert, so I totally understand sometimes the confusion. Do I ask? Do I not ask? Will people mind? It's salary is always a very, very sensitive topic and a very, very personal topic. So okay, Sadaf, I'll pass it to you to just share a little bit of context around what typically comes up in your conversations, and we can tackle it question by question or observation by observation.
So I've seen that a lot of times. There is a general theme around um, taking and giving feedback, and so essentially performance reviews become a big conversation topic during the coaching sessions, and within that remuneration is a part of it as well.
Yeah.
um, because it's not usually that it will come as a separate discussion point. Everybody tries to fit it in to that agenda point, and in that I've seen there is a lot of confusion around what are the etiquettes
Yeah.
um, of talking about salary. And when I talk about etiquettes, there is such a shroud of mystery around salary package. And I think it's a bit of a societal thing as well, whereby talking about money is considered a bit
Yeah.
and because of that, whether it is your manager or whether it's yourself, you just don't know.
Hmm.
You're kind of feeling like you're walking on eggshells. So therefore, there are these questions that keep coming up in the area of, if I do go to my manager and ask for a reconsideration on my remuneration, um, it just kind of hits you in your mind that I wonder what my leader or my manager is
Hmm.
thinking. So I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
ask you as well, that what do you think that they're actually thinking when somebody comes up
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, interesting question, and I think there are a number of factors here. A, we were just discussing before we started that culture plays a part, number one. In my experience, in my observation, gender also plays a part, how men think and how women think and how they approach this. I also actually feel that generation also plays a part. So how like a Generation X like myself would probably go and approach this topic. It's probably very different from how a millennial or a Gen or like a Gen Z is going to approach the topic, right? So I think there's like all these factors coming in. I think the biggest thing, I think the biggest factor right now in terms of how you approach is probably pivoted around how aware you are of what the market is like. Whether it's the general market awareness, okay, for example, if you take any market, you take UK as an example, okay, how are salaries in the market? Okay,
Hmm.
then you can say, okay, I'm in a function where, there are dime a dozen more people. So, okay, even if I go, and if they want, they can fire me and get somebody else.
Hmm.
Or if you're in tech, you'll be like, everybody knows tech is a premium right now. So it's just my right. I can go because everybody's paying higher. If a manager doesn't pay me, I can go find another job, right? So I think all of these factors, basically have an impact on how you approach it, how aware you are. I think, in my experience, the more aware people are, the easier it gets to approach that topic, right?
Hmm.
In fact, there's a very interesting study from Gartner. This was, I think, in 2019. And they actually pivoted on gender pay equity, and they actually did a research around the perception of pay.
Hmm.
So, and it was obviously more attributed towards women in the workforce, but that research was like that if you only have a perception that my pay is low, it leads to a number of factors, right?
Okay.
You don't know for sure whether that's correct or not. You have a perception, you haven't even approached the manager, okay, for anything. But if you have a perception that your pay is lower for whatever reasons, you are more likely to leave. Your engagement will be lower.
Hmm.
Your manager effectiveness, even though manager might be great, you will just feel that the manager has not been fair to you at the back of
Hmm.
your mind, right? And there are a
Hmm.
number of other things. So I think to summarize what I've shared is, I think the first step is how aware you are. Generally, people who are more aware about how you're being paid or what the market is paying, I think it helps a little bit in terms of approaching the manager. If you just
Hmm.
go blindly in, I'm like, as a human being, I'm not going to be confident because I'm just going to go, I don't know, should I approach because I don't have enough. If I know, okay, this is how much the market is paying, I have some awareness, I've done some research, and I know that, okay, I feel that I'm not being paid well, you are more likely to go to your manager without any hesitation, at least have a conversation.
Hmm. I want to ask this. I want to ask, when you say be more aware, do your research. Um, that's where it starts getting a bit tricky,
Yeah,
because you just don't know where to start from.
yeah,
Usually, what employees do is they kind of ask their colleagues,
yeah,
because whether HR likes it or not,
yeah,
we all used to tell everyone what bonus I got.
yeah,
At
exactly.
least at a managerial level, you would do that. At a director level, it would get a bit patchy.
Yeah,
So everybody knew everything, but HR would keep it really like tightly
yeah,
controlled.
yeah,
So your first line is always that, okay, get HR to give you some sort of idea of what is your pay point,
yeah,
for example. But then what for you are some of the practical tips? Like, where do I get the research
yeah.
from? What does awareness mean?
Yeah. So I think the great news is that we have now tools and visibility that we didn't have 20 years back or maybe even 10 years back. So I mean, like how I would recommend, or like what my tips for anybody, would be that you have a lot of tools now which you didn't have. So let's take an example. The simplest one, let you go to Glassdoor and you just put in location, everything, it gives you something. Now I'm not
Hmm.
saying whatever number that is you just pick up that number, because their methodology is a little bit, I mean, have some question marks on that. But if you, at least it gives you a starting point, wrong or right, at least you have a starting point, right? And Glassdoor has the type of company, the industry, the title, all of that. So that's one data point. Second data point is that, like you said, a lot of these conversations have become a lot more common now than they were 15, 20 years back, right? People are more open to talking about, they can give you a range. 20 years back, it was like, oh, how did you ask somebody's salary? Like it wasn't considered a nice thing. I have seen like in offices where people are a lot more comfortable asking. So you can use your network, you can use your family members, you can ask your friends, okay,
Hmm.
who you trust, that, okay, how does your company pay, right? If I need to know something, obviously I'm in HR, so it's easy for me to go and ask other HR colleagues, by the way, give me a ballpark, right? But if you have a group of friends or family members or a network, at least to give you an indicator, that's your second point. The third one I would say is that on LinkedIn or on job sites, many jobs actually have a range of salary, right? And that's, I would say, is your third source of information, where if you just go to your whatever country job site and say, let me just look up, marketing jobs. Okay. Again, it's not going to give you a really specific figure, but it gives you a ballpark. So, and in many jobs, you also know which company is hiring. So if you know a sizable recognized brand name is hiring, and they're hiring for a manager level job or a director level job or an entry level job, that's your data point as well, right? So if you know a big multinational company is hiring at a director role, that's a senior role, right? By default. So you know that if they have displayed a salary, that's one data point. If it's a managerial level. So now you extrapolate that if you are looking out for a job, or you want to know whether your salary is good or not, you go to job sites, you go to LinkedIn, especially now, in fact, in US and many European countries, we are getting into laws which actually mandate companies to post salary ranges. I would say Asia is a bit far off, but for a fact, many states in US have now mandated you can't put up a job unless the range is mentioned, right? So I would say Western world has taken a head start there. US, Europe are probably going to become a lot more transparent. Asia is a little bit far off, but so if you are in Asia, I would say look at job sites, talk to your network, use any available platforms. So Glassdoor is one, salary.com, as far as I understand, payscale.com. They do have global data points as well. So I think if you combine all of these together, and I'm not saying you're going to get an answer tonight, but if you are that serious about your pay and you want to know more, you spend some time, I think you can be in a reasonable state to know whether your salary is around the market, low or higher. At least you have an indication.
So Sajjad, in what you're saying, obviously they're super useful because it's better to go and get that research out before you go blankly into the conversation. But it gets a bit tricky when you've been. What you're telling is super useful when, for example, you just got a job.
Yeah.
Or you're in the initial phase, and usually I've seen that your future line manager doesn't try to negotiate. They kind of say HR will connect with you and you guys sort it out, and obviously if there's a problem then you escalate.
Yeah.
But when you're in the role, it's been a year
Yeah.
or more. I think that's where it gets a bit tricky because a relationship has been formed. You're a bit new.
Yeah.
You're not sure. So in that circumstance, what is it that you should be doing from a research awareness point of view? And the reason why I ask is I want to know your point of view is
Yeah.
us, for example, um, you knowing your colleague's salary gives a clear-cut indication of where you're sitting in the pool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, it gets very like, if you go into the conversation saying, my friend gets this much, and
Yeah.
what the hell, I do more work than him or
Yeah.
her, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that puts the obviously line manager in a very defensive position, and they'll try to justify it and whatnot.
Yeah.
What would you recommend how to get out of this kind of a situation?
I think personally, whether you're about to join a new company or applying for a role, or you have been in the role, right? So I think I guess the question is, what is the primary reason why you all of a sudden after a year think that, okay, my salary is not good? So option number one, you said they found out that their colleagues are being paid more, right? So that becomes a trigger point.
Yeah.
Second could be you realize that, okay, it seems like in the market there are a lot of jobs. People are all jumping for 20, 30, 40%. And, implicitly you start to question, okay, maybe I'm not being paid correctly, right? Especially in companies where pay transparency is not really, really great, which is unfortunately the case with many companies, especially local operating companies. They don't have any structures which are available publicly, right? So it's very easy for people to think, okay, you know what, I got hired, okay, because I need a job. Yes, I got whatever salary I want, but it feels like maybe I didn't get enough, right? In either scenario, I would say it goes back again to doing research, to building awareness, right? Whether I'm applying for a new job and I want to know whether if I'm going to ask for 100, is 100 the right number? Or I'm getting 100 right now, and after a year, I'm like having doubts that maybe the company's paying me less. right?
Mm,
Again, I would say you go back to the drawing board, you do your research, you find out, you connect with your network. I think the process is the same, right?
mm,
You could be in a job, or you could have just gotten promoted as well, right? And after the promotion, you're like, oh, you know what? My responsibility has increased so much. Now I have a team. I don't think my salary is justified. It's just human nature. Again, like I said, salary is something you're just never happy with, no matter how much you get. So I would say in all the scenarios, I think you have the tools and you have access to information which you never had before. And in all those cases, I would say that you go back and you do some research, find out where you stand, or at least get an indication on that.
mm, mm. So in that situation whereby I also see that how do you build a case for
Yeah,
your negotiation, right? So
yeah,
one is obviously the hard numbers
yeah,
itself, right, which gives you the industry standard. In some cases, like pay point is there in some companies, in some companies it doesn't exist.
yeah,
um, but that also gives you an indication, because for example, the whole organization is actually very poor in paying, so obviously the industry norm it might not sit with them, right?
yeah,
That's a reality. What one other thing which I've also seen is that how do you build a case is work scope is obviously super important, that what is it that you're doing.
yeah,
And I think before going to your boss and saying I want a salary increase, I think you have to do a bit of digging in within yourself, that I'm a high performer, why do I think that, and what are the indicators
yeah,
in case. So I'll give you my own personal example. Is I hope my ex boss is not taking this. But anyway, he knows, and I kind of laid it out with her. So I had found out that I was coming from Pakistan to UK,
yeah,
and I had another colleague who was coming from Singapore to UK.
yeah.
Same role, yeah. And but the pay points were so low in Pakistan, Unilever
That's right.
Pakistan versus like, and Singapore pay points were like super
Yeah,
high. They were like most expensive resources.
yeah,
So they actually poor people from Singapore coming to UK, they got destroyed standard of living, but
yeah,
whatever. They were really expensive
yeah,
resources
yeah,
in UK. So I would always get this thing of, oh, Sadaf, you're coming from Pakistan, so the pay point will be less. Eventually, we'll get there. And
yeah,
then I found out that, then you end up getting feedback. You're in the role, you're very new,
yeah,
you get confident. People are telling you, oh, high performer, blah, blah. So it kind of hits you in the
yeah,
head that, wait
yeah,
a second, why
yeah,
I'm like a high performer according to them, promotable, blah, blah. What's happening?
yeah,
And I kind of, I think this is the first time I had the conversation with my boss, and my boss was new in the role. She was very new VP in the role.
yeah,
And I brought it up. I had to tell her, I got to know it
yeah,
might not be the best way, but I found out.
yeah.
And what do you think? What do you think?
Hmm.
And then obviously the reaction came. The part which I found useful in this is the technique of not stating it, but asking it.
Yeah,
Uh,
great point.
getting your boss to give an
Yeah,
answer
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
doesn't put them in a defensive position. So again, my evidence was not the industry at that point. My
yeah,
evidence was keep an eye on what indicators are being given to you by your bosses, and how does it compare to the rest of the team as well,
yeah.
to kind of put it out. And to be honest, I was very surprised. I asked once and I got it.
Okay,
So
nice.
I was like, oh, this wasn't that
Easy.
bad. Why are we told that? Okay, so it didn't require a big fight. I was like,
Yeah,
you go in charge and it's like, it's gonna be a fight, and I'm going to kind of just
yeah,
say it.
yeah,
And you're like, oh, okay, fine. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know why we play it in our heads too much itself.
I
But
mean,
from
it's a,
an go for
sorry, go
it.
ahead. No, no, go ahead, go ahead, go
So from an HR point of view, because you were on the dark side itself, um, why does HR keep this information so hidden or
Yeah,
mysterious? What's
yeah,
the
yeah.
reason?
I'll just say that I think that's a great approach, that rather than going that you're preparing for war, you go and you basically say, you do a coaching in reverse coaching session with your
Good
boss.
question.
The
Yeah,
boss, why this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Ask them all the tough questions.
exactly.
So you put them on the spot and let them do the work. So I think that's a
Yeah.
great approach, by the way. I would highly recommend that to anybody, that because you don't know how, especially if you don't know your manager well, it can
Mm.
backfire as well, right? So if you, whether you know your manager or not, it's always a great approach to take it as a reverse coaching approach, that, this is what I think. What do you think? Do you have, what do you tell me? I have these concerns, all of that. So I think that's a great approach. Look, there are two parts to it from an HR perspective, right? I would definitely say there are many companies who don't have the right, I would say, structure to have these conversations, right? I'm not going to comment on whether that's whatever the reason is, but unless you have done your work correctly, okay, because pay transparency requires you to have your structures correct. Okay, you
Mm.
should know that if I, whatever structure you build, if you've done your work, you are confident to defend it. Okay, so I'll be honest and say that there are many companies, unfortunately, who don't have that.
Mm.
That they're not confident, they don't have the structures. It also depends on, this also differs market by market, because for example, if you are in what I call an employer's market,
Mm.
okay, they get to decide what they want to pay, and there is enough talent in the market that they will just pay whatever they want to pay and they will get talent. In an employees market, they don't have too much to play with because they need people. It's a good market for employees, and employees can drive that negotiation, right? So if I know, and compensation thankfully has always been always in demand. So all wherever I have gone, I can say this is what I want. Either you give me, or there's no discussion happening. And
Mm.
and this also is coming into what we call the skills-based economy, where we're starting to see many skills that are becoming very important, right?
Mm.
In HR, there could be three jobs where those jobs are very much in demand, right? In tech, the entire tech industry globally is in demand, but you could have
Mm.
certain skill sets in marketing, in finance,
Mm.
which, and this is cyclical as well, by the way. So in UK, you might find out that currently all accountants are in great demand. 3 years
Mm.
later, somebody in supply chain is in demand, right? So these cycles also happen. So coming back to your point, why HR doesn't do it is, number one, there are many companies who don't have the structure. Number
Mm.
two, I think, and I do personally believe that it is sometimes, it creates a negative impact on employees if we are too overly transparent as well, right? Now, the reason I say this is that every person who joins has their own history, right?
Mm.
And if I'm hiring, for example, you, excuse me, can we have everybody on mute, please? Thank you.
Okay.
So I don't know, your history basically. So it could be
Mm.
that because you've been paid higher or lower, I can't influence that. My job then becomes that if I want to do the right thing, I ignore what you have been paid and I pay the value that you think you're bringing to my organization. And I would say the more progressive organizations in the world are doing that. Predominantly, this has become a very common practice in the tech industry, but I know many other companies are doing the same, where if I am hiring you, your low pay or high pay is of no importance to me. Once I evaluate you, my job is to pay you the value that I think is fair, is
Mm.
equitable, and is going to pay you for the skills and expertise you're bringing into my organization. And but that also compares to those existing already in the organization as well,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So we are
Mm.
moving there. A lot of, like I said, progressive companies are doing it. But I think if I just publicize completely transparency outside, you will have low performers who think they're high performers, right?
Mm.
Which is always the case. There are many people who overthink that they're God's gift, and they might be like, oh my God, against this pay scale, oh my, I don't agree. That's one
Mm.
part of it. Your historical salary might come into play and say, we may have done right by you, but because you were being paid so low against the market, you might be like, okay, this is still not enough, or whatever,
Yeah.
because your pay scale says something else, right? And to an extent, I think there's cost management as well. We can't just pay everybody a high salary all the time, because we want to be fair, and we want to manage salaries as well. So no straight answer, but I think, like I said, I think a lot of times HR is not overly transparent, or we can't be fully transparent, because not every employee is going to think straight, right? Like I said, many people will think they're not being paid fairly. I think the critical thing from my perspective in HR is, we in HR must do what we need to do, so that if anybody comes to us, we can actually respond them in the right way. And I think
Yes.
that's the big difference, that many companies unfortunately don't have that.
Yeah. And I think that's the part where the line managers as well, they need to encourage
Yeah.
um for that negotiation to happen. You might be shooting yourself in the foot, but you know that it plays a very big role in a person's motivation.
Yeah.
Especially if there is, um, if we're dealing with women,
Mm.
um, then you know that there's a likelihood that they might not bring it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think in that case, a line manager um, should be encouraging in those conversations that, obviously if they have enough room in their pockets, they will just say, okay, listen, I'll
Yeah.
give you 10 more,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then okay, great.
Yeah.
uh, but somehow that conversation has to happen, and I think you brought it up as well in one of your previous chats, that when you were also hiring, there was a bit of
Yeah.
not wanting to discuss.
Yeah. I
How did you encourage that conversation to happen then?
I think there is this whole piece of education and awareness, and I mean, and I mean, I know we have talked about it, and I think, I mean, I'm not shy to say that I think in general women don't negotiate well or actually even ask for it. I won't take my team member's name. I mean, they both know me really well, and when I was making an offer to them from my last company to previous company, or actually I was coaching one, I said, how much money do you want? They're like, oh, just give me whatever you want. And I'm like, okay, we would get physical if you were in front of me because all these years I've been wasted coaching you and training you. But
Uh,
it is what it is, right? So I think there is this inherent you want to call shyness or shame or fear where they feel that if they ask for it, it's going to reflect bad on them. And I think there's absolutely nothing, there's no harm at all, because you are just having a conversation. It's not like you're saying, oh, if you don't give me 200, I'm not joining. That's not what we're saying. We're saying if you feel that you want 130 or 120, and again, it doesn't have to be the right or wrong number, right? You have the right to ask for it and
yeah,
absolutely not feel shy or shame. In fact, as we've been discussing, if you actually have data to support it, you must go and ask for it, right? Because it's fair. If you know that you're being paid 100 and it seems like, okay, 120 or 130 is the right number, right? Whether it's you're applying for a role or you're already in the organization and you find out later, you must go and you must escalate that. There's
mm,
absolutely no harm, or you should not feel shy or fear at all. Like I said, I think what's important is whenever you have this conversation, you should have your research done correctly. Like I said, you don't want to go in saying, "Oh, I think I'm being underpaid," and I feel like, because if you're just going and shooting in the dark, like you said, it's going to have a negative reaction. Even if it's a manager, it might not reflect well.
yeah, yeah. And I think we were talking about some of the research that has happened in the past on this topic, which I found interesting. It was, just for everybody's reference, it was a research done between, um, Lean In, which is Sheryl Sandberg's organization for women, along with McKinsey. The research is specific to North American women. They're like 64,000 was the sample size. It was pretty massive and intense,
Mm.
um, itself. And what I found interesting in there was that as compared to men, women equally ask for a salary increase, but them get the chances of them getting, the salary increase, is actually low, versus men.
Yeah.
So, and it kind of circles back to the negotiation part, because in the same breath they also say that when women go and ask for a salary increase, they sometimes don't say a specific number,
Yeah.
simply because they feel that, okay, let me just ask, let's see what they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and then the line manager might be like, ah, but why, and the conversation ends up going into some other direction.
Mm.
So, and men come with a specific number. It might be something completely ridiculous, but they
Yeah.
throw in number because they know
Yeah.
that's the way then the
Yeah.
bargaining will happen, and it will
Uh,
eventually come down to something
yeah.
acceptable in between.
Yeah.
Um, what is your reaction to that, about women resisting and, the element of shame? Why are men more shameless?
I don't have the answer to that. I don't know. Maybe something to do with the DNA or something like that. I really don't know. You should probably go talk to some scientists or doctors on that. What's the inherent reason why men just go and say, I just want 200, even if it's like a ridiculous number. So I don't have an answer to that. I do think that that's how things have been. And I think, like, if you look at the research on gender pay alone, right? And also the fact that unfortunately in many organizations, the decision makers have been men, right? That
Hmm.
doesn't bode well. I know for a fact, we actually did a fair bit of work around conscious and unconscious bias,
Hmm.
right? And that actually plays a key role in I think some of this. So, conscious bias is something that I think we can tackle easily, through trainings and coachings and awareness. It's the unconscious bias that's actually very hard to tackle, because you might be a great manager, right? But if you have unconscious bias, it will play out in some way, right? I've
Hmm.
seen some really, I would say very, I don't want to quote more, but horrible examples of conscious bias where leader like is saying verbally why they have this bias towards women, right? And they're completely okay with that. So I'm like, okay, at least if I know, I can do something about it. But if you have an unconscious bias, it's very hard to say. It's very hard to tackle. And I think over a period of time, I think this has seeped into, I think, our way of thinking, and how it impacts our culture, and how it impacts how women approach this topic as well. I don't like
Hmm.
I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's a combination of all these last few decades of thinking and mindset and approach, and the fact that decision makers have been men. Culturally, like I said as well, culture plays a long part. Like we were discussing how this is a very US based research. I would say the numbers probably are much worse if you think about
Yes,
emerging markets,
of
in
course.
Asia, probably, for example. So, these factors don't help. So yeah, I don't have an answer, but I think the key from my perspective is to really increase awareness and education, specifically for women in general. But I think it requires men to also understand, that what is the right way. So as a manager, if a female employee comes to me, what is the right way of handling it, right? Like to your point, you went and your manager was supportive. Many times we know that the manager will say, oh, it's not in my hand, go to HR, right? I
Yes,
also
yes.
don't think that's the right approach,
Hmm.
right? uh, Ultimately it's the manager's responsibility to manage the employee. It's not HR, right? If an employee is coming to a manager, they have to ensure that they give the confidence to the employee that they will do whatever it takes to get to the right answer, even if they can't fulfill what the employee wants, but to give them the confidence that they will do whatever it takes to at least have the employee get the answer, even if it's
Hmm.
without them. I think that's very critical, that I think that's an upskilling that we have to do for managers as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, those are a couple of thoughts that I have.
And I guess, for women itself, one thing we have to kind of, I don't like using imposter syndrome as the terminology like gets abused and used a lot. But something in that area of, I think when you're getting the job and you're doing well, um, you sometimes kind of think that it's too early to ask. After all, what have I done?
Hmm.
Go and ask. So there's too much of that reflection and resistance. Um, and and when you kind of join an organization, and they ask you what you want, what is your expectation, and they say whatever is appropriate, it's
Yeah,
almost like giving the other person all the power,
exactly.
um, to define what is your worth, and that kind of
Exactly.
then, there's no point of it.
Yeah,
Then
there's no
fine,
point
then
there.
they will control it. Then they
Exactly.
will control it forever. So best of luck to you, lady. It's not gonna help. So for women, there's this one quotation I saw which is quite interesting. It's a Black American tech CEO. I'm not aware of her name, but during the same lean in research, she said that women are hired for what they have done, and men are hired for what they can become.
That's correct. Makes sense.
And I think that's where this kind of pollutes your
Yeah.
mind,
Yeah.
and I just have to keep justifying why I'm
Proving
asking
yourself.
for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereby men are considered, he's going to become so
Exactly.
successful, so much of potential.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. Yeah. Agree.
um forward. So do you see that playing out in the minds of the decision makers as well?
I think there is a big part of that, as you quoted that. I think it struck me that I think as much as we need to make aware of, as much as we need to educate and increase awareness in women, I think there's a big part of that that's around increasing awareness for managers as well.
Hmm.
Both male and female managers, by the way. So I've actually had an experience where one of a female leader that I was one of my stakeholders. she had a very clear conscious bias in favor of men, because the job she was doing, she said, it's a function, I can't say more, but it was a function where more men work. And she's like, I need my team. I get her point that, okay, yes, she's a leader, she has to drive and, all of that. But that's a very clear conscious bias, and she's a leader, right? So I think that awareness and education also has to happen at the leadership level and at the managerial level. That, I strongly feel that it has to be performance driven, number one, right? Because it should be fair. So from a reward perspective, one of the principles that very important for me is everything has to be fair. Okay.
Mm,
And then it doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman, right? So whoever does well should get more. That's number one. Second one is that you need to be aware how to have the right conversation, right? I think a big part of what we miss out is that managers actually don't know how to have the right conversation. It's actually one of the things that I am working on in my company, is how do we upskill managers to have the right conversation? Because what will also happen is, part of that is to build trust and credibility with your team.
mm,
Now, assuming we know that women don't like to bring this up, okay, and there is, let's say, whatever fear they have, and education and awareness takes a while, but if we can upskill managers to build those connections and trust with their teams, I would assume that you will find more people willing to have this conversation on this topic, right?
mm,
So if a manager has built that credibility and goodwill and all of that, even more shy people, for example, or introverts, right, might be more willing to at least try and have a conversation, which is probably
yeah,
not happening right now, because you have the fear, your own self don't allow it, you don't have the data point. I feel from a human, relationship point of view, and that's why I think that manager upskilling and manager credibility and building trust is so massively important. I actually feel 80 to 90% of any employee experience is dependent on the manager, right? You could be
yeah,
working for any company, but if the manager is good or bad, it plays a huge role.
yes,
And to that extent, it could instill fear, because you're like, oh, my manager is crap. I know if I ever go to them, I'm not going to get any support. So that
mm,
the conversation just never happens.
mm. And I think that's where the trust building becomes quite critical, and how to build that trust. And I think the way these performance reviews or um, um, mid of the year reviews are concerned, we're usually told by our line managers that go prep around the areas of what you've done and what is it that you want to do in the future, and your future growth ambition, and you come and discuss.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but I think the manager should call it out and
Yeah.
say that let's also have a discussion around what do you feel about how you're getting rewarded currently,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what's your expectation around it as a topic of agenda
Yeah.
itself. Obviously, it will dislodge the reportee that what are you talking about? What are you on? Are you sure I'm going to ask for moons and star, the moon and the star? Um, but I think till we don't build it from the manager side,
Agreed.
um, it's not going to happen, because you come
Yeah.
in prepared. In some cases, you might come in very aggressively
Yeah.
to the line manager to put the line manager off, and then it just becomes a battle of egos.
Yeah.
Because in that one other research which I was reading is that it was saying that women who do end up asking for salary increase, they're later on perceived as being too aggressive and bossy.
Yeah.
So,
I've heard as well.
so it's like, where do we
Okay.
win?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's versus a man coming in and say, okay,
Yeah.
no, because
Yeah.
somehow this whole concept also of men, they have, family to feed,
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
that kind of gets into everybody's head. I know a lot of my male colleagues, even over here, they used to play that card quite a lot. And I was like,
Okay.
what's my fault in all
I
this?
think there is a flip side to it, which is actually I've also seen actually a fair number of managers where you don't need to go and have a discussion. Like
Mm,
they actually take active interest and
mm,
active participation in the fact that they are keeping an eye on all of these things, right?
mm, mm,
So you whether you've joined their team or that you got transferred to somebody's team,
mm.
they take this very seriously,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
and I've learned from a lot from these leaders, because I realize that their mindset is that for them to be effective leaders, they need their employees to perform at the optimal level. If that means that they need to have build a discussion, build a relationship, build credibility, trust, pay them well, and I know for a fact that they will also actually fight for you before you go and ask for it, right?
Yes.
So if they feel that you're doing the job, they will go and have a discussion and say, by the way, with HR or with their leaders, and say that, amazing person, A, B, C, D, E, I think we need to look after them, all of that. So I've actually seen a fair, obviously the numbers are not, on a holistic level, not too many, but we do have these examples as well where
Agree.
managers don't need to be told what to do. If they
Yeah.
feel that, like their team members are not being paid fairly, or that progression is not taking place, they will actually actively, proactively go and lead that discussion.
And that is bringing a smile to my face, because something that happened to me personally as well was whereby when I was a manager, I during that 1 year, I never asked for, um, and I'm talking about Pakistan context, huh?
Yeah.
So having that kind of a leader over there was kind of, a bit
Yeah.
unique. Um, so I never brought up that I want a promotion, a salary increase, or anything. But I remember being called into the boss's office,
Mm.
and being told that, listen, you're going to get promoted by this month of this year, and I'll
Wow.
give you the letter myself. And I was
Wow.
like,
Whoa.
okay. And that date comes and I get handed over the letter by that person. And I'm like, whoa, and that kind of stayed with me for so long that eventually I
Yeah.
wanted to do the same,
Exactly.
as
Exactly.
well. And when you do that for your employee, and I've seen
Yeah.
that, keeping an eye on pays, scales of your team and the extended team, um, it used to be my favorite pastime in my previous role. It's like I want to keep an eye on
Yeah.
who's getting what.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I would kind of pitch for promotions, and then without
That's
knowing
correct.
they'll get promoted. So it kind of, it just, then you focus on performance,
That's
then you
correct.
don't waste your energies in these areas themselves. So
That's correct.
that I think, yeah, you're right. Managers and getting trained on it,
Yeah.
it becomes quite important.
I would say that probably upskilling managers is probably a faster way of solving, I think, what some of the things we're talking about, then going. I'm not saying we should not educate, but like I said,
Mm.
there's so many factors: culture, family, your background, all of that. But I know companies, especially post-COVID, there is a general trend. In last 2 years, in fact, Gartner 2024 and 2023, top 5 priorities by HR leaders across the world is manager and leadership upskilling, development. Because I think makes perfect sense, because like I said, if you're 80 to 90% employee experience is driven by the manager, not having average effective managers is going to impact a lot of things you're going to do in the company. So I
Yes.
think that's probably a quicker way. I'm conscious of time. I would love to see if we have questions. I know we have one question from Ali's on the chat, so I'm just going to go through that. I have a question that in cases where salary bands are rigid within the organization, how can we negotiate for alternate forms of compensation or benefits that match against the value we bring? I would like to know how to negotiate in negotiations in such cases. So, Elise, thanks for the question. I'll share, a thought with you. Happy, Sada, for you to join in as well. Uh, where in your organization salary bands are rigid. Now, I don't have the context, but look, salary bands technically should be moving every year because the market is moving every year. That's thought number one, right? Uh, Assuming you say that we don't keep up with the market, so the market is moving 20%, you're only moving 10% for whatever reasons. How can we negotiate for alternate forms of compensation and benefits? So the first one always is going to be incentive plans, right?
Mm.
When we say pay for performance, like we started the conversation, that salary is one part of it, right? Uh, I'm a strong believer of having really, really effective incentive programs.
Mm.
Especially, for most companies, it would be a bonus plan, whether it's a sales incentive plan. I think those are something that you can build line of sight against performance, right? If you're doing well and if you're adding the value to the company, you're creating the impact, you should be rewarded accordingly, right? So if the company is doing reasonably well and you're doing well, then that's where incentive can really, really pay out that additional form of reward that your good performing employees deserve. I think benefits gets a little bit more tricky, but I think if you have something like a flexible benefit of sorts, which allows maybe perhaps a portion of performance into it, maybe that's something that you can consider. Recognition programs, by the way, also a fantastic way to monetary and non-monetary as well, but you can create recognition programs where for a certain level of impact, there is some form of monetary recognition. It might not be enough, but at least there is some form of monetary compensation, which is again linked to performance to that extent. So I hope I was able to answer. If you have anything following up on that, please do ask. Does anybody else on the call have a question that we can help with? Any questions from those on online? Tanvir, do we have any questions on LinkedIn Live?
Just a second, let me check.
Okay. All right, so if you have any more questions, we can continue. We still have about 11 minutes.
So the other part, which I think I want to talk about that a bit more, is obviously we talk about the salary, and you touched upon the rest of the incentive pieces itself. Obviously, if it's like a tech startup thing, then stock options become quite important for them. That's the way they pick people. But for the more conventional organization, which are really big, the blue chip ones, over there, that option is a bit more limited for very senior people, executives and directors. That plays a very big role. So during that knowing your worth part itself, those things related to the bonus and the other rewards, how do you get awareness around that in your
Look, I think that's HR's job, very honestly. If you have, and I say it because if a company is offering something, it needs to be communicated. Okay, there's no point of you offering a car benefit or a bonus or a recognition plan or coming up with amazing like these insurance programs and proactive health coverage and all of that if you're not going to communicate. I think one of the biggest gaps I have seen over the years is that companies don't communicate well. They might communicate once, but this is something that you got to keep communicating. So if, for example, if you have a bonus plan, incentive plan, right? You at the start of the year or whatever it is, you must communicate to employees, how does the bonus plan pay out, right? In fact, I would again say HR leads the way, and we get managers to, so when we do target setting at the start of the year, managers should talk about what that means for employees, right? If the company does well and if the individuals do well, what is the opportunity for you, right? And like you said, that as we go higher up the ladder, this becomes a significant portion of total package. So I think it's important for us to highlight what is at stake here. Similarly, if you are coming up with any sort of new benefits, there are so many new innovative benefits in the market right now, right? If you're doing something, please communicate. If you have lifestyle benefits, which I know many companies have started to offer, specific to groups of employees, please communicate that. I think, in fact, I've actually seen that when we start to communicate some of these, the employees' number one utilization of those things go up. Oh, I didn't know that I could actually go and get that thing done because it's covered in the policy, right? But it also helps drive the right level of engagement and performance, because if you communicate and employees appreciate what you're doing, of course I'm going to like that. Oh, companies actually have all these things in place. But if I actually don't even know, then how am I going to appreciate?
True. There's one situation that comes in my mind related to bonuses at the end of the year. It's a usual disgruntlement that happens. I've noticed that obviously the some targets are set for a category or a brand or the company or whatever it is, and then you get compared versus those, and then you get a certain pot of money, and then it gets distributed. To the people, and obviously there are it goes down based on percentages. However, there is a disgruntlement, especially at at more junior level, maybe the manager or the assistant manager level, whereby they say, I worked like a dog all year round, and in the end I got such little bonus. What's the point of it now? And obviously, then the manager might say, no, but that's the pot of money we got, and our overall performance was weak. So sometimes it becomes very difficult to disassociate or associate yourself with that the performance of my brand or my
Yeah,
category or the company has a direct impact on me as
that's
well.
correct. That's
In
correct.
such cases, how should the manager handle that disgruntlement so that it doesn't come as a surprise later
Yeah,
on?
yeah. I think it's a very common occurrence. You're absolutely right. I would say there are two thoughts I have on this. The first one is that the first part actually it plays around the bonus design itself, right? So let's take an example. You might have an incentive plan which says that 50% of your bonus comes from your own performance and 50% comes from company performance, whatever that means, right? Uh, if that design is clear and now employees know that my individual rating contributes 50% of my performance, okay, that's their line of sight. Okay, so yes, I understand. I work for a huge company which has 100,000 employees, and I can't really control the company part of it, but at least I can control the individual part of it, right? So I think the first thought I have is that it's the design, and that's why I said incentive programs can be designed in a way where employees don't feel, oh my God, no matter what I do, I just don't control any part of it, right? So the key to any incentive design is how much line of sight can you give to the employee, right? If I know that I control at least 50% of my bonus, that's not bad actually, right? If I do well, if my targets are robust, if I over deliver, I have an opportunity to at least control and over deliver on the 50% of it. And then I hope that the company is doing relatively okay as well, so that the company does okay, and if I do okay, I get something meaningful. That's point number one. Second one is, I think, and again, I'll come back to managers' responsibility, that if managers at the start of the year get the team together and individuals together and say, by the way, this is what we're going to do. This is what the company wants to do. This is what you individually have to do, right? And if we can all hit that, right? And if we all do well, we can make good bonus at the end of the year. Of course, at the start of the year, nobody knows how the year is going to go. I think one of the interventions that I've designed and I've implemented in a few companies is that we have tried to retweak that target setting conversation, right? What usually happens is business decides, it cascades down. Manager says, this is the target. Okay, what will you do? Sign it up. Okay. It is never a proactive conversation. What we're saying is that you need to bring the team together. Firstly, identify that you as a team actually contribute directly to business performance, no matter what department it is, right? Because a lot of junior employees will be like, oh, I only do this. What is my value? Like, like to your point, no matter what I do, I don't impact. So there is that piece that it doesn't matter what job it is. If you don't do your job, it is going to impact company performance. So I think managers can play a decent role that at the start of the year, when the year is about to start, if they can reposition the value of the team and the value of the individuals, what can they achieve together, what is at stake, what opportunity they have, then I think it at least you start on a decent note. And if you can continue doing throughout the year, even God forbid if the company is not doing well, but you're having regular conversations, I think that in my experience, the bigger problem is not having the conversations. I think that the employees are not happy because they never had a decent conversation throughout the year, right? And it frustrates, the frustration comes out because if they worked so hard at the end of the year, company didn't do well, they didn't get the right feedback, and they got low bonus as well. I can tell you from experience that employees are okay getting less money, but if you recognize their contribution and their impact, they are more happy with that. The problem is their assessment and evaluation is completely not okay, and therefore it doesn't matter what reward you give them, it doesn't make them happy. And there's a whole separate discussion for this. I'm not going to get into that, but a lot of that stems from the fact managers don't have the conversations with employees.
Yeah, that's because a lot of them avoid it, or a lot of them, I've seen some of my coaches who really, whether they're on the receiving end or the giving end, they really don't enjoy the process
Yeah.
itself. It takes a lot of their personal energy to kind of do it. But I think that's where what then they have to be mentally prepared. If they don't have that conversation, then get
Yeah.
ready.
Exactly.
Because it will lead to frustration later on, for sure. So I know that's a useful context. And I think what you're suggesting is that when you start off the year, it's very important to define what is in your control. What is it that you can control and impact?
Yeah, agreed.
Your contribution, because the company is formed of multiple businesses. You don't have control over all of them. It's not
That's
it's not possible. And at an ABM level or an assistant level, it's really, really low.
yeah, that's
Uh,
correct.
Obviously, what doesn't play well is that when you end up getting 4,000 pounds of a bonus and your CEO gets 1 million,
Exactly.
then we have a bigger conversation.
Yeah. I would say one more thing. I know I'm conscious of time. We've got 2 minutes left, because I know you're into coaching. So I'll share, like, one of the things that we've done in this intervention that we've created is to introduce managers to the concept of coaching. Like you said, right, that managers feel like, oh my God, if I start doing what I'm suggesting is talk to employees, I will have to take out so much time, right? My challenge is actually that if managers truly become coaches, okay, they will need to actually spend less time with employees, because you are going to, over a period of time, empower employees to make more decisions, take more ownership, and you are going to drive a higher level of performance,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So the problem is, right now I go to my manager gives me a solution. I am always going to the manager because I feel, okay, I can't take the decision and I must go to my manager for every decision. And the manager is like, oh my God, my team is useless because goddamn, I have 8 people and every 30 minutes they're coming for me for decisions, right? You flip the equation and you say, you have once a week conversation with your manager only for 30 minutes, and you say the 10 things you need to say, and manager is only having a coaching conversation because 80% of answers are with me. Okay. Over a period of time, I realized, okay, guess what? My manager actually only asks me question and ultimately I give the answer and says, you do what you need to do. And so maybe I don't need to go to my manager that often, because in the past 6 months, I've done pretty much whatever I needed to do and he didn't have a problem, right? So you're empowering your team. Managers become more effective because then they can spend time on the things for which they were hired for. They weren't hired to solve your team's problem, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty that I think coaching brings in. And I would say that I think from managers' perspective, I know some companies are doing this at an organization level where they're saying every manager must go through a coaching practice and at least start their coaching journey because it's so powerful.
On that happy note.
Yes, on that happy note. Okay. So, if any last thoughts before we close?
No, I think I'm glad we did this conversation because I think I wish I had this conversation with you when I was in corporate
It's always
career.
a good time.
Because you really want to ask HR those questions like why do you do those things. But I think it gives context to a lot of conversations, and I think if I want to take one thing out of it is, guys, don't avoid the conversation. It's not a big deal. We make it a big deal in our heads, and the percentages are with you. If you ask, there is a very high chance you'll get the increase. So just ask. It's a bullet that you should use.
Awesome. Thanks, Sadaf. Thanks everyone for joining in. We will have this recording available on YouTube as well. Appreciate your coming in. Sadaf, enjoy the conversation. We need to have more tough conversations on other topics as
Yes,
well.
let's do that.
So we'll schedule something else as well.
Feedback and delegation.
Absolutely. All right, next one. All right, thanks
Bye.
everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.